State of the Union. State of the Union. Hannah, Montana. State of the Union. State of the Union address last night, February something, 2019. Gotta do a video about the State of the Union address. I smash a bunch of shit over on this desk, as I did last year. A video about the State of the Union address. State of the Union address this year, status quo. Very excited last year at this time when President Trump gave his State of the Union address. This year, nothing unexpected. Still very exciting. He's sticking to the things that he said he wanted to stick to. Most importantly to me, in this State of the Union was his mention of the NAFTA agreement and the repealing of it and replacement. If you do not live in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, mainly Michigan, you probably don't realize the disaster NAFTA caused. Here in Michigan, Flint, Michigan used to be the place to build automobiles. I mean, we had all the Buicks that were ever made came from Flint, Michigan. There was a plant known as Buick City, and it was literally a city within a city. I mean, when we took this plant down, I mean, this place was gigantic. Anyone who was anyone in the wrecking business did something over there. In the end, it was a company called MCM Management who ended up with the majority of the contract, and they were there for years, taking down buildings. I don't know how many jobs Buick City employed. I have to guess 20,000. And the only reason I'm guessing that number is that in the plants, the bigger plants that I've taken down, 5 million square foot plants, 4.5 million, 5 million square foot plants, those plants generally employed somewhere around 10,000 people. So when those plants closed, that was 10,000 jobs. But if you look deeper into it, that's 10,000 families. That's 10,000 foreclosures, 10,000 divorces, 2 cars in each family, 20,000 repossessions. Just absolute devastation for people who, when I was growing up, when I was a young kid, you couldn't meet too many people without maybe the third person you met, their father worked for GM, or they worked for Ford, or they worked for Chrysler. A lot of people who lived in Detroit, you would find more people that worked for Chrysler back in the, now going back before my time, in the early 70s and 1960s, where you're talking about Dodge, Maine. When I started getting involved in the wrecking business, they were taking down, oh God, what was the name of the job? I know it was Cadillac plant. And my neighbor, who owned the largest demolition company in the area, had that plant, and that was at Clark Street. Yep, Clark Street and Michigan Avenue. It was a big Cadillac plant. And that plant pretty much made that company. And then shortly after the company broke up, long story short, that's kind of when I got into the wrecking business. And during the 1990s, I tore down or was a part of just about every demolition of every General Motors and Ford plant, or rather, there wasn't too many I was not somehow involved with. We took down the plant in Flint, Michigan, #1 plant, which was where the United Auto Workers Union was formed. Yeah, and the last really large project I did in Flint, Michigan was the AC Delco plant on Dort Highway, which was 4.5 million square feet. That was in 2008. I tore that down. Just around the corner from that is General Motors Truck and Bus, which what I have heard is that General Motors is not going to tear that plant down. They're going to keep that plant going because it specializes in truck and bus, period. So it's lucrative for them. When NAFTA was passed, from a business owner standpoint, why should I pay? I'm paying this guy $20 an hour to put the bolt on to put the nut on the bolt. And general assembly worker, probably $18 an hour with benefits, maybe $35 an hour with his health insurance and retirement fund and all that kind of stuff. And I can move that whole plant across the border into Mexico, which a lot of people do not realize, that all those plants that I tore down in Michigan, in Flint and the surrounding areas, southeast Michigan, all those plants still exist today. They're just over the border in Mexico. Back to, from a business owner standpoint, okay, so you're paying a guy $20 an hour to work on the assembly line here, versus I can build the plant in Mexico. It's going to cost me millions to build it, but I have those 5 million square foot plant, and I employ 10,000 people. I pay them $2.50 a day. From a business owner standpoint, it's a no-brainer. And there's no repercussion from the United States. If you guys who watch the channel are young enough to remember when President Clinton was running, Clinton was running against Ross Perot, and one of the famous quotes from Ross Perot was that sucking sound you hear is the sound of our jobs going across the southern border. Okay, so, and that came to fruition, unfortunately. And that was because of President Clinton was getting ready to sign NAFTA, the NAFTA agreement, which was drawn up by the Reagan administration. You're looking back on this time, I don't know what problems they were trying to solve. The Reagan administration went through, that was a hard time in the United States, and I don't know what the NAFTA agreement, what problem that was trying to solve. But the end game was bye-bye automotive plants, bye-bye manufacturing plants. It became and then once business owners realized they could not just do it in Mexico, but they could do it in China, they could do it in India, and in China and India and these other Southeast Asian countries were offering an even lower. I mean, what we're talking about here is slave labor, which goes on today. Here in the guitar community, we see it all the time with the chips and guitars. If you need one reason not to purchase some shit like that, is to think that, it's being built by people who are probably fucking working their ass off 18 hours a day and starving to death at the same time. So if you need a reason to not purchase counterfeit stuff from China, if you want a moral reason not to do it, there's your answer. These people are probably, like I said, working 16, 18 hours a day, and in the meantime they're starving. They can't even afford to fucking eat. This is what NAFTA created. And this is also a perfect example of how what affects what goes on in the United States, how it affects things around the world. So yeah, that got deeper than I thought it would. But that was my main takeaway from the State of the Union address. I was happy to see President Trump mentioned that. And he mentioned the, the people from Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky. I tore down plants all over Kentucky, especially when I first started out. I can remember going out of town and being out of town for months on end in the state of Kentucky, tearing down automotive plants. Ohio, same way. In fact, I did a lot of work in Toledo because, we're not far from the Toledo border, and there's I don't even know if it's even there anymore, but right across the border in Toledo used to be a huge Chrysler Jeep plant. I don't even know if the plant's there anymore. I took down little by little, worked on different strip outs, and it's still going on. The difference is what we're seeing in the wrecking business now is I'll be doing a job in Chicago here coming up at a big Ford motor plant. Difference is we're not tearing the plant down, we're stripping it out for retooling. And that is a direct result of this president offering some incentive to the manufacturing companies such as Ford to build products here in the U.S. When I was growing up, I probably, when I was a little kid, I caught the tail end of, people used to be proud to buy a product that was built here in the United States. And when you bought a product that was built here in the United States, usually you would spend a little bit more money, but you were getting the superior product. People, especially here in the Detroit area, if you were driving a Japanese car, automobile, you were looked down upon. It was the inferior product. However, the truth of the matter was, it wasn't the inferior product. It was actually the superior product for a hell of a lot less than the product that's built here in the United States. And if you don't believe that, go see how many Nissans are on the road, how many Honda Accords there. I think there's a site. People keep track of how many hundreds of thousands of miles they put on their Honda Accord and Honda products. And the Japanese just started kicking our ass when it came to building automobiles. I mean, in the 1980s, I'm sorry to say it, but the Japanese were kicking our fucking ass. They were putting out cars with, that were $5,000 less and lasted longer. And just on general maintenance, And that's what built up the Japanese economy to where it is today. And then, of course, China comes and gets on board in the last 20 years. And the difference is China's not kicking our ass. China builds everything. This is probably Chinese. This is a Benzomatic. And I'm not sure if a Benzomatic is, since 1876, not sure if it's built in the United States or not. Looks to be Columbus, Ohio. 2200 Old Wilson Bridge Road, Columbus, Ohio. Worthington Cylinder Corporation. Hopefully it's built in the United States. But what I'm getting at is, I guarantee this thing here that I showed before, that's probably made in China. And pretty much all the products we have are made in China, unfortunately. This PowerMate air tools that I have, they works pretty good, but doesn't hold a stick to the American-made stuff. You know what I'm getting at here? So that's my takeaway from the State of the Union address. It was status quo. I mean, President's, standing by his values, standing by what he ran on, looking to get border control done, is what it is, so I was pretty happy with it. But mainly I was happy because he recognized the NAFTA agreement and the devastation that that's caused, and I can't wait to see that get repealed. So you guys tell me what you thought about the State of the Union address, and until next time, peace out.